Now that we have our app up on Heroku, we don't want to show our logger messages whenever we fire Redux actions. So how do we remove it specifically only in production? Because we still want our logger during development. Well, in order for us to do this, we have to understand what the logger is. And understanding what the logger is requires us to understand what middleware is inside of Redux. So when we built our store, we understood what our root reducer was. And we also understand that when actions come through being dispatched by our action creators, they hit the reducer and update the reducer. But along the way, they also pass through any middleware that we apply through this apply middleware call. And all middleware are essentially these functions that we can write that catch actions and do something and then return the action so that it continues down and updates our reducers the way that we know that they do. The logger, for example, is a middleware that catches the action and then logs it to us, as well as logging what the state was before the actions update the reducers, as well as what the state will be after they update the reducers. And all we need to do to make sure that we only apply the logger when we're in development is we set our middleware's array to be empty. And then we say if the process dot environment dot node environment is equal to development, then we will run middleware's dot push our logger. Now, what is this process environment? So inside of Node, there is a environment variable. We can set environment variables, or Heroku sets environment variables. But luckily for us, Create React App actually sets an environment variable, which can only be accessed through this process.env call, and this node env being a property on, as we can see, the process's environment file. It's either going to be development, production, or test. And this is useful because it allows us to know whether or not our app is being served in development or in production. And when we push to production, when we call yarn build, it tells the thing that's serving our application that it needs to switch this node environment variable over to production. Whereas normally when we just run our yarn start and host it on our local server, it sets this node environment variable over to development. And we can just check for it using process.env.nodeenv. So what we're saying is that if the node environment is development, then we want to push the logger into our array. If it is anything else, like production or like test, we don't want it. So apply middleware will just call with no middleware. And with this code, we can now see that on our local host, we still have our middleware running. Our logger is still working. But if we go back to our application and we say git add, git commit-m, removing Redux logger from production build. Now if we git push Heroku master, this will push our live changes to Heroku and we will see that the logger will no longer fire. So let's just wait again for our Heroku build to complete. It actually should be faster this time because we've cached our node modules from the first time it built. So if none of our node modules have updated, then there's no reason it will rebuild our node modules. Okay. Now if we go back to our application, in our Heroku, if we refresh, we will see that the logger is no longer firing. And just like that, our production application is pretty much finished. So that was really easy. And that's the beautiful thing about Heroku, is that we can easily deploy our React websites on Heroku just by going through those quick, simple steps that we went through to push this live. Now, The caveat with Heroku is that the free account is running on a shared, what they call dynos. And all that means is that we are only given a certain amount of time per month for free where we can build these projects. So whenever we push and you see us building this project, we're using up that time. Now, I think Heroku gives us something like 500 minutes, which is pretty good, considering that we're not going to be building that often per month. But the other thing is that whenever you try and access the website, so whenever somebody goes to the website, it is usually in a sleeping state if the last time it was accessed was greater than 30 minutes ago, which you'll see symbolized by this ZZZ. So when you access the website, Heroku has to turn our website back on, which might take a couple seconds. But generally speaking, I mean, it's all for free, so that's still pretty good for us. And people generally understand that if you're hosting on a Heroku website, it's not a big deal. If you attach a credit card inside of your personal settings, down here inside of account settings, inside of the billing, if you attach your credit card, you will get more hours, which is good for us if you wanted more time. And it's pretty easy. They won't charge you unless it actually has to and you update your pricing plan. So those are some of the caveats of using the free Heroku plan, but it's so easy and it's so good to use. And it's so well supported that there's no reason for us not to use it. But now that we have our Heroku serving up our live website, we can move on to the next section of our course, which is adding in optimizations on our existing application.